Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again for My Music with Graham Coath. And this afternoon, I have the pleasure of being joined by Charlie Nieland. Hi, Charlie. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Do you know what?
It's a nice
Every
11 o'clock
single...
here.
Oh, well, there we go. There we go. Every single one of these interviews that I've done lately, someone's had a guitar of some description hung up behind them.
Yeah. It's an 8-string bass. It's a Rickenbacker 8-string bass.
Oh, that's actually quite unusual. I
It
mean,
is.
we've had 6-string basses when I interviewed a bass player the other day, but we haven't had an 8-string bass. How did you come about that particular guitar?
Well, I'd seen them used by a few bass players. Chris Squire used one live a few times in Yes. And it's like a 12-string guitar. They're in pairs of octaves. It's still 4 notes, but with a lower and higher octave, and you fret each note, you fret each pair of strings together. Yeah. So you play like a dual octave with each thing you play. And I don't know. I saw one in a music store in the 90s in Manny's Music in Manhattan, kind of a famous guitar store, and I was like, I have to have this. And I don't know, it's woven its way in and out of different songs over the years. It has a really distinctive sound, kind of like a piano.
Yep.
But also it's great for like that kind of Cure type bass if you let a lower note drone open and then play melodies over the top on a higher string.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Yeah, were you always a fan?
I have to hang it because the tension is so strong on the neck it bends unless you hang it.
Yeah, it has to be vertical, otherwise it doesn't. I interviewed Billy Sherwood not so long ago, who obviously sort of took up Chris Squire's.
He does a great job.
Yeah, so good. He had some nice basses. He definitely had some very nice basses as well.
He's good.
Was Chris Squire? Talking about Chris Squire, was Chris Squire a bit of an early hero for you musically, or
kind of the early hero? I mean,
okay.
I don't know. As far as I loved my parents' record collection had like Abbey Road and Beggar's Banquet and like a lot of Beatles and Stones and other FM radio, early 70s FM radio stuff. But then when Yes came along, that was kind of like my band. And for a while, you know, I mean, I loved a lot of 70s music as a 12-year-old, and I couldn't decide what instrument I was going to play. And then I don't know, I saw a film of Chris Squire playing, and I was just like, I think I'm going to pick bass.
Yeah.
And then when I got the bass, I started learning Yes bass lines, and I realized, wow, I kind of can do this, and then it kind of went from there. That was the first instrument I had any mastery of.
That's tremendous. Well, which was the first Yes album you listened to?
The first Yes album was Yes Songs, the triple live record that came out in '73.
A beautiful thing.
It was amazing. We would move to a suburb of Milwaukee in Wisconsin from Chicago, and this next door neighbor had that and a bunch of other big kid records, and that just kind of opened the door for a lot of stuff for me. And I don't know, he's such a unheralded musician. I mean, I know he won a lot of awards and stuff, but he's so musical, or he was, and just a really, really inspiration. He has an amazing solo album called Fish Out of Water that came out in '75.
Absolutely.
Orchestral pop. It's really great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. With Moran on keyboards as well.
Yeah,
on that. Yes. Yeah, no, it's really, it's one of my favorite albums. So
it was an influence on my new record.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say there seems to be a million influences on your new record, actually. You talk about The Cure just a minute ago. This is a great record,
Thank you,
my friend. Absolutely a great record, and it's one of those that requires some good listening as well, like all decent albums do.
I like albums like that. I know what you mean.
Yeah, this isn't a put it on, listen to it once, and go, oh yeah, I've got that. Yeah. This is a put it on, listen to it, and go, I've got to listen to this again, because it's going to take a few times before I even begin to unravel what's going on here.
That was actually a goal of mine when I was starting to produce the songs for the recordings.
Yep.
The Flaming Lips haven't put out an album last year called American. What was the name again? Anyway, the most recent Flaming Lips album had just come out, and I was listening to it and noticing that it took me several listens to hear all the things in some of the songs. And I was like, I want that. I want that thing where like you hear it once and then you hear it, you put it on again. You're like, well, I didn't notice that part, and I like that where there's a discovery. So you have a story. Basically each listener can have their own little story with the album. With like, I remember this, and then this, I discovered this about the album. And I don't know. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, even vocally, I think you try out different things on different songs, which is quite interesting. I mean,
thanks.
I always listen to an album in terms of vocals because I was a vocalist. So, and some people can't do different voices, but you can, which is nice. It still sounds like you throughout, which is always important that it's your own voice. But I can hear you're trying various things in terms of
I think
what you do with your voice.
Most of the singing came really naturally on this. I didn't fuss about it too much. And part of the process of getting this record done was to do part of it here in this room with this microphone, to get it ready for the drummers I was working with, and to get kind of skeletal versions of the songs with programmed drums and a guitar part and a vocal part. And I ended up keeping all the vocals that I did sitting here with this mic.
That's cool.
Because I don't know, they just had a natural quality that I knew once I got later in the process, I would just be struggling to recreate, but like cleaner or better. And I just let it go. I was like,
well, maybe that's what it was then. You say about stories and sort of, each of these songs encapsulating little stories. Did you have sort of ideas in terms of sort of the narrator of the story then for each one that maybe have influenced how your voice sounded?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole thing that over the past few years, I helped produce a performance series called Bushwick Book Club. And all of these songs were written within the guise of Bushwick Book Club. So each month a book is selected and a group of songwriters get together and write a song inspired by the book. And then we have a show.
Yep.
And I've been doing this for a number of years. And this is the second album I've made of songs that are all in reaction to books. So each song has a book that it was inspired by or I was responding to. So a lot of times I'm writing a song of something that I'm feeling, but I allow the book to sort of give me an image or an idea to sort of bounce off of. You don't have to have read the book to enjoy these songs, but they do all in the credits for the album. Each book is listed under each song, but
I love that. I love that because what you're doing is you're allowing the person that enters into that little world to go and explore a little bit further, and you're and you're sharing some of obviously your passion for those books and that artistry to seep into the record. I always think that's a really useful thing or a really beautiful thing to do, because actually it expands beyond the streamed version of the song. And it's that's something I talk about a lot in my interviews with people. But in this day and age where everything is just streamable, it's really nice to have that more tangible element to it. And, that gives you that more tangible element here, isn't it? You have to buy this and you have to have the notes to see where the relationship is to the books. Again, and then you follow that up. You buy the books as well.
Saying it's like there's a element to it that you can follow up on and have a kind of a further story with, or else you can just enjoy it for on its face value. If you haven't read the book, you can still enjoy it that way too. But if you choose to look into it and read a little bit more about the author, or even read the book, I also think that it's just interesting when different art forms create space for each other and influence each other it opens up different layers of meaning for those works. And
did you always like that sort of growing up as well? Because I know I did. I used to like, for example, I used to like, some of the prog bands where some of the imagery may have been sort of Tolkien-esque or whatever, and then it may have come out of a poem or a book by someone like Tolkien, and then you then went and read Tolkien, and then you got interested in sort of the backstory behind Tolkien, etc.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much exactly what happened with Tolkien for me. I mean, once I heard like the Zeppelin songs and understood that they were, read that they were referring to this thing called The Lord of the Rings or J.R.R. Tolkien, and I kind of wandered into that world. And also I loved, reading those books and listening to music at the same time, not necessarily listening to the corresponding Zeppelin songs or whatever, but I would listen to, whatever music I enjoyed as a backdrop to reading. Sometimes I can't do that as much now. My brain gets fried if I try to do anything at once. But I used to really like that.
It's interesting that I've noticed that as well as I got older. I mean, I don't know who it was said it the other day, but I read someone who was getting to my age as well the other day, saying that, when they were young, they could absorb everything and they could tell you exactly what track on every single album something was. They had that encyclopedic knowledge of albums and music and lyrics, etc. And when you get a bit older, it starts to sort of mingle a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, our brains prune. We prune brain cells. We're losing brain cells all the time, but usually there's a function there cognitively that makes it so we think more efficiently on the pathways that we're used to having. And it's kind of like our personalities form more truly over time. But we have there's a lot less action going on than when you're, under the age of 16 or whatever,
Yeah, but also we had a lot less responsibilities and time, and we had a lot more time. So, I kind of like to balance it up and think,
a lot more hormones.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I like to think that we have more time to just sit and listen to an album over and over and over again. And those things were really special to us. But also there was another element to that as well, which is that you had to save up money in those days and buy an album. So
yeah,
I know. You couldn't just stream it. So, having spent your dosh on a particular album, you had to invest time in it.
That's an interesting insight. I didn't even think of it that way, but that's true. But I mean, again, with that Flaming Lips album, that was one of the first albums I had recently experienced where I just wanted to listen to the whole thing as a whole a bunch of times. And but I admit it, I don't take the time to spend 40-50 minutes listening to a whole record, and mine's nearly an hour. So I get it, but I think Divisions, my album, has kind of sections. Like sometimes I listen to it and I realize the order that the songs are in, that like there's like 3 kind of sections, and you can kind of leave off, and then a thing happens, then there's this like last section that's I don't know. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the title Divisions. I mean, does part of it reference the actual divisions within the album itself?
It just might. I didn't think of that, but I shouldn't have said that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know. Divisions was inspired by a book called the Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. And in this book, they talk about how in a forest, there's an ecosystem where underneath the ground, the roots all feed each other and trees help each other out, and through a system of fungi. And there's kind of a traditional forestry idea for a long time that, trees were competing with each other, and you had to cut down certain trees to let other trees grow. But the author of this book says it's a much more of an organic whole. And anyway, the idea of it struck me as really profound in light of how incredibly dehumanized we are with each other in terms of like our different silos of class and race and politics, and the sort of idea that the people who oppose us are somehow not even worth considering. And I don't know, just
well, they're a different species almost.
yeah. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, there's this incredibly, incredibly vivid thing going on, that are completely connected with each other. We depend on each other even to be enemies. It's like we need that like foil to like create our identity, and we do it completely unconsciously. And anyway, so the song Divisions, the title track, is kind of a plaintive cry, and the kind of there's a key line that kind of popped in my head when I was working on the song, that twisting on the brink of what's to happen, and it just always feels like that now.
Yeah.
And
but is there a positive ending to that as well? I mean, I'm interested in the album art as well, because obviously, in fact, I'm interested in the typography, because I've always been interested in typography. But you've got these 3 rings that come together.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we suggesting that there's, or is that your Led Zeppelin moment?
It's a symbol it's a rune that means unity.
Yeah.
And my friend Hypnodoll, who did the cover art and she did a couple of the videos, she actually came up with the typography, and I was just like, that's perfect, So
well, it is. It is perfect, isn't it? I mean, yeah. No,
I didn't direct her to do that. That was, again, it's the same thing with how she interpreted the music for the videos. She really brought a really incredible insight and opened up the meanings to these songs with a lot of great imagery. And it's been a great collaboration.
Don't you always love that when you collaborate with people? I mean, that's the nature of true collaborating, not just giving someone a piece of work and saying,
totally,
give me back what I expect, but actually, here's my body of work. What do you read into it?
That's been one of the best things of making this album and putting it out, and even bringing it out into the world. I'm collaborating in a way with you and with some really amazing DJs who have been playing my music in the UK and other places, and they have these great shows that are filled with these eclectic but very curated, really have a point of view kind of collections of songs. And it really, especially with a lot of new music I haven't heard, and it gives a kind of it elevates my songs for me. I hear like, wow, my music is kind of part of a thing that it feels. I know it's really exciting to have reached out and connected with all these people, and a lot of people who spend a lot of time and energy of their own doing this for no compensation. And I really admire them,
Yeah.
And
good.
Writers and everything. It's great.
That you mentioned, all of the musicians that you mentioned so far have all been male. I don't know if you realise that now, but I heard some in listening to no, it's fine. But in listening to the album, I also heard some fairly more recent female references as well. Talk to me about that. Talk to who on sort of the sort of modern stage of music from the female side of things do you sort of admire and may have had influences on this album?
Well, definitely PJ Harvey, and going back a little further, Kate Bush and Cocteau Twins, Susie and the Banshees. They were all huge influences on me. You can hear like in a song like The Falling Man, it's like Radiohead and Susie and The Cure. They're all kind of like worked in there, and definitely PJ has. I think PJ is like our David Bowie. I love how she recreates her concept and image with each record, and she's such a great vocalist. And then Cocteau Twins are like a foundation thing for me. That was another, like, I would say the next big signpost after Yes was XTC, and then the Cocteau Twins. I was just, how do they make this music? And I was always like trying to get to the DNA of it and figure out, and that's definitely an influence in there.
Yeah, and was it any particular part of the Cocteau Twins? I mean, was it Robin Guthrie's guitar? Was it Liz Fraser's
kind of? I mean, all of it. The way it creates a whole. So then I started picking it apart, and like, so Robin Guthrie's playing these like single note melodies, and then the bass, Simon's bass, is not playing root notes all the time. A lot of times it's playing chords high up on the neck. So it has this floating quality. And then, the really intricate drum programming. And then Liz's voices, she has these two different personas of this sort of ethereal, almost operatic voice. And then this really keening, like, just like cut straight through you voice, and the way she plays those. I mean, I thought it was two people at first when I first heard them. And I saw them live a few times, and I felt really lucky. What a great, I just think they've been a real influence underneath the surface on a lot of music, even though if you say Cocteau Twins to a lot of people nowadays, they're like, what?
No, they're not in my world.
Good. You live in a good world.
Yeah, absolutely. So bass, I mean, in all of those musicians you've talked about, bass and strong bass is definitely there. So I can hear where the sort of love of bass comes from in the first place, and experimenting with bass as well.
Yeah.
And it's, and as you say, not just necessarily driving a normal rhythm, but actually creating parts with a bass, using those different tones of the bass to actually create different parts.
That was a big part of this record too, because, I did the thing that I read about. Well, I've kind of evolved it over the years in my producing other people, that I like to save the bass till last, or almost last. And
which cuts against the grain, actually, doesn't
usually
it?
Bass is considered like a foundation instrument, so you get it in there first so you can put everything on top of it. But for me, a lot of times it's just getting a rhythm guitar part or piano part or whatever, the foundation chord instrument, getting that in there first and then building outwards. And the bass being last, you can respond to everything in the music, not just playing along with the drums or the guitar part, but you can respond with the vocal melody and sort of create counterpoint, and it just gives you ideas to like jump out of the regular role. And I read that Paul McCartney did that on a bunch of the later Beatles stuff, and you can hear it, and like in Getting Better or Fixing a Hole, it's like the bass never repeats. It's always like, being very playful, and
it moves. Yeah, it intertwines.
And I was able to like mess with the sound, mess with the bass tones with each song, and like try a different bass tone and different basses.
I think that must be why I like this record so much. I think some of my favorite bands, their bass players do that. So there you go. It's obviously that kind of melodic journey throughout the whole thing, and the bass taking you into different areas, which certainly this album has. So thank you for doing that.
I'm glad you like that. I'm glad you like that.
No, thank you very much. So where next for you? I mean, this record obviously needs a little bit of promotion still, and we're obviously more than happy to promote it for you. But
thank you.
What happens next for you? Is there another record to follow this one?
Well, I mean, each record I make, I'm busy doing songs with the Bushwick Book Club. I also have a band with the founder of Bushwick Book Club called Lusterlit, and we've made a series of singles and EPs over the past like 4 years. And I'm producing several other acts. And then when enough songs of mine sort of gather together, I make another record. And that's what happened, especially during the lead up to the lockdown. I just started feeling it. I was like, oh, I want to bring back like some of the guitar stuff I did in Her Vanished Grace. That was my band of like 20 years in the 90s and 2000s. And I don't know, each record I make feels like the best thing I could do in that moment. So I know at a certain point, I'm just really feeling great about this one right now. And in maybe 6 months, I'll look at it and go like, I could just do it a little bit better. And I'll just start like thinking about doing another set of productions, I don't know.
I think every musician that's worthy of walking this planet thinks like that. I don't think fans ever quite agree with that, because actually I think everyone will look back on this and go, this is a great album, and continue to think it's a great album. But yeah, I think you have to. And I guess most musicians that I've talked to have always said as well that one album is quite often a reaction to the previous album.
Sure. Sure.
And
I've been there.
This is of a particular ilk. As you say, you might go raw for the next album, or you might, if you've got the guitar, if you're thinking about those guitar parts, you might go, I'm going to strip it back to slightly more aggressive guitar stuff.
I'm having some ideas already about doing something that's a little more, that's a little more groove oriented.
Yeah.
So that might be a thing. Well, but I say that now, and then I could wander off in a different direction. I'm not really.
But sure. That's the beauty of it. Yeah. I mean, I think the creative brain is the important thing. The fact that you have these thoughts and you've got a constant journey.
Well, I think making a record is interesting. Producing music in the studio, it's really how you're feeling on that given day. No matter how much you plan it, there's an element of just responding to the moment. And if you're experiencing that moment, you have a great take, and that becomes the emotion of the song. And I think that's whenever I work with people, or when I was working on it myself, you try to put yourself in a place where you can have that experience, and that really gives it some life.
Does doing the production for other people, does that really help you in terms of your own creative journey as well?
It does. It does. Yeah. And it was something that I initially was resistant to when I was producing my own band 20 years ago. And I didn't really start producing other people's music till about like 20 years ago. But in the years before that, I thought I only had the brain space to do my own stuff. And then when I started working with other people, I realized, it really generates energy and ideas that I end up like putting in my own music, and it makes me want to do more of my stuff too.
Yeah, I can see that. I have a similar thing, not obviously necessarily with music, but in the kind of work that I do as well. I think the more that I kind of work outside of my little bubble and spread myself into other bubbles as well, then it kind of generates creativity for myself, and I have to be creative on a day-to-day basis. So I think people don't realize whatever job you're doing, or whatever creative thing that you're doing, to get up every morning and be creative expels a lot of energy.
Well, I think we live in a spectator culture where a lot of people think that I'm not creative, or I can't make that. I couldn't do something like that. And they love to watch it as a participant, but not do it. And I think a lot of people there's other cultures where everybody's involved and everybody is encouraged to be creative rather than compete,
Yeah.
And I think it gives life a whole nother dimension to be making something, some kind of art, or just something that you feel connects with people. And to just keep active and keep your mind and imagination open.
Just one last thing before you go, because it's something I always like to know from people, which is, if you could, who would you collaborate with? Either on producing their work or on your own work.
I thought about this before. I think it'd be really interesting to be produced by somebody, because I've always ended up just producing my own bands and everything. So I would love to have been produced by Brian Eno at some point, just to experience all the ideas and this idea of bottom up creativity that like he has of finding small micro things and allowing them to dictate the structure of stuff. And that would take me out of my usual like, oh, this is what this thing is. And then he always, he with like oblique strategies or whatever, he brings those ideas that really change things and again, draw you into the present moment, but that's somebody who I would love to work with someday.
Well, let's hope that happens, sir, because that would be great, even if it's on one track.
Oh yeah,
of an album.
That would be more than enough.
Yeah. But I think dreams like that are worth it. I think everybody's got them. Everybody's got the people that they would like to work with, like to collaborate with, would aspire to work with. And it's part of having those kind of people that you look up to in a way that kind of drives you onwards to get better at what you do. So,
yeah, it would be nice. And I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody's that's watching this back at any stage does know Brian, and would like to put a call in, that would be really, really good. Charlie would like to make at least one album with Brian. That would be a wonderful thing. Charlie, thanks for taking the time to speak to me today. I really, really do enjoy this album, and I'm looking forward to growing with it, or it growing with me over the coming year, because as I say, this is the kind of album that you can't just listen to once. You do need to actually take your time with and enjoy over and over again. There's so much to listen to on this album, and it's right up my street. So thank you very much for making this album.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. That feels really good.
Thank you.
It's been really nice talking to you.
And to you. Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye.